Sera stormed through town with murder in her eyes and a ghost floating smugly at her side. It was far too early for this. Moonbright had always been a town that rose gently with the sun, cozy, warm, alive with soft magic and quiet chatter. Cobblestone streets gleamed under the golden morning light, mist curling like whispered secrets through alleyways and open market stalls. Enchanted brooms swept doorsteps of their own accord, bakery windows fogged with the scent of cinnamon-dusted pastries, and little bursts of magic shimmered over thresholds as shopkeepers murmured morning charms. Ordinarily, it was peaceful, lovely even, but Sera had long since learned that her mornings did not get to be peaceful. Not when she was being followed by a dead man in a tattered coat, with a poet's sigh and no regard for personal space. And what disturbed her most, what truly crawled under her skin like an itch she couldn't scratch, was not just Elias's persistence. No, she could have handled that. She had plenty of experience with unwanted attention, mostly from love potion enthusiasts and tourists who thought bothering the town witch was an adorable activity. But Elias unsettled her in a different way. It wasn't just the way he looked at her, though that was infuriating enough, like she was some long-lost beloved wrenched from the arms of time itself. No, what disturbed her most was her own reaction. She should have been used to people clinging to stupid notions of fate, of romance. Moonbright was practically built on that kind of nonsense. And yet, something about the way he said her name with such deep, aching certainty sent tiny, unwelcome shivers through her spine, like he knew her in a way no one ever had, like he had the audacity to believe she was his. Sera squared her shoulders, tightening her grip on her satchel as if it could anchor her back to reality. "I really don't see why you're so upset," Elias mused, floating effortlessly beside her, as though he belonged there, as though her brisk strides and murder-capable glare were of no consequence to either of them. He moved with an annoying sort of ease, his long coat drifting where there was no wind, his midnight dark hair tousled in a way that suggested he had once been the kind of man who kissed too easily and made promises he couldn't keep. Sera clenched her jaw. "Do not acknowledge the roguishness. Of course you don't understand." She muttered it under her breath, knowing full well that was an understatement. Elias, unflappable as ever, pressed a hand to the ghostly remnant of his chest, feigning deep, wounded tragedy. "You act as if I am some terrible burden." "You are a burden." He ignored her completely. When, in reality, Sera had heard quite enough. She whirled on him so fast that he barely avoided drifting through a nearby fruit stand, his spectral form flickering at the edges from the sudden motion. "Elias," Sera hissed, her green eyes blazing with the kind of frustration that only Moonbright's worst meddling could inspire. "You are literally haunting me." Elias sighed as if she had just whispered a love confession, rather than rightly accused him of supernatural loitering. "Oh, but darling," he murmured wistfully, "aren't soulmates meant to haunt each other in a way?" Sera twitched. She inhaled, then exhaled, struggling to hold together the very last, very fraying threads of whatever patience she still possessed. Unfortunately for both of them, that patience had never been substantial to begin with. Without another word, she turned on her heel and marched forward, deliberately ignoring him. Not that it stopped Elias from continuing. "Really, though," he continued, his tone turning thoughtful, even idle, as if they were simply on a lovely morning stroll. "I can't imagine a more perfect arrangement. I spend centuries searching for you, finally find you in this quaint little haven of a town, and then you break into my house, and then," he pressed on, "fate binds us together once more. It's rather poetic, isn't it?" "I would say tragic," Sera corrected, her fingers flexing at her sides. Moonbright's market square was beginning to stir with life, townsfolk emerging from warm homes and cozy storefronts. Early risers bartered over fresh produce, farmers exchanged enchanted crops, and spell vendors arranged shimmering charms along their display tables. The aroma of caramelized cinnamon and spiced tea drifted from the nearby bakery, cutting through the crisp coolness of morning. Sera should have been here in quiet solitude, restocking for the apothecary. Instead, she was deliberately walking faster, as if she could escape her spectral nuisance through sheer force of will. Unfortunately, willpower had clearly never been enough when it came to Elias Thorne. "Where are we going?" he asked, unbothered by her growing tension. "Are you taking me on a morning rendezvous? A romantic outing?" Sera's hand twitched toward her bag, where she very seriously considered extracting a handful of grave soil and hurling it at him in hopes of neutralizing his ghostly presence. Instead, she took a deep breath and answered with forced, deadly calm. "I am," she said, voice flat, "going to Granny Hazel's." Something flickered across his expression, a brief moment of hesitation, something almost thoughtful. "Ah." Sera slowed, finally catching on to that hint of something, and this time she didn't ignore it. Elias had floated along beside her, easy, amused, and relentlessly composed since the moment they'd met. But this hesitation, however brief, might have been the first crack in his armor. Sera arched a brow. "Oh? What's this?" Elias schooled his expression back to something casually charming, almost too quickly. "Oh, hardly," he said lightly, brushing off the idea. "It's simply that one should approach elder witches with caution and respect." Interesting. Sera narrowed her eyes. Caution? Elias cleared his throat. There was one incident, years ago. Oh, this just keeps getting better. Elias lifted a hand in an innocent, placating gesture. "In my defense, it was entirely her fault." Sera gave him the most skeptical look she could physically muster. He grinned. "I may have charmed someone I should not have, and in response she may have temporarily trapped me inside a haunted mirror as a lesson in humility." Sera stared. "She cursed you into a haunted mirror?" "For 2 weeks," Elias admitted, rubbing the back of his neck in what she could only describe as nostalgia. Was that nostalgia? Sera blinked at him. Then she grinned, because finally, after 24 hours of relentless, ghostly nonsense, there was some hope. If Granny Hazel could curse him into a mirror, then she could definitely get rid of him now. Feeling notably better about her morning, she strode forward with renewed determination. Elias hesitated only briefly before sighing and floating after her. "Darling," he mused as he caught up, sounding both skeptical and reluctant. "I don't suppose we could discuss this first?" Sera smirked. "No." The town square was already alive with the easy rhythm of morning business. Shop doors yawning open, enchanted lanterns flickering low in the dawn, and the scent of sugar-dusted pastries curling through the air like a spell meant to lure the weak-willed. Fortunately, Sera Blackwood was not weak-willed. She did, however, have an infuriatingly persistent ghost trailing after her like a particularly amorous shadow. "Sera, dearest," Elias said, "must we rush? The morning is lovely, the company even lovelier." "We're going to Granny Hazel's," Sera interrupted, her tone flat. Moonbright, for all its charming oddities, had one significant flaw. It was severely lacking in rational people. And yet, for once in her life, Sera was hoping, praying, really, that someone in this town would be equipped to deal with her current nightmare. Elias sighed dramatically as he drifted alongside her. "You know, inviting an elder witch into our affairs so soon, some might call that a rather serious step in a relationship." Sera didn't even spare him a glare. She just kept walking, because as far as she was concerned, Elias's relationship with Granny Hazel was about to be strictly one-sided, and preferably exorcised. Unfortunately, fate had other plans, because the closest person within reasonable distance, The one whose shop she now found herself approaching was the absolute last person equipped to handle this situation with any amount of sense. Dahlia Merriweather, Faye Baker, chronic romantic and part-time menace to society, was standing behind her bakery window, artfully arranging glazed pastries on silver trays. Sera stopped in her tracks. Dahlia hadn't seen them yet. There was still time to turn around and... Too late. The moment Dahlia's keen golden eyes landed on Elias, her entire face lit up. She gasped, an honest-to-God's hands fluttering to her heart kind of gasp, as though Sera had just presented her with the greatest romantic drama of the century. "Oh, my stars," Dahlia breathed, already surging forward on flour-dusted feet. "A love ghost?" Sera groaned. "Not a love ghost, just a regular, run-of-the-mill annoyance." Dahlia completely ignored her. Instead, she skidded to a halt in front of Elias, eyes practically sparkling. "I didn't know ghosts could be so handsome. Look at you, so tragic, so poetic. Oh, wait." She gasped again, this time for dramatic effect. "Are you cursed?" Elias gave a slow, knowing smile. In a manner of speaking, Dahlia actually squealed. "I knew it." Sera dragged a hand down her face. "Dahlia, please." Not even a pause. "Oh, what kind of curse? A tragic star-crossed one? A doomed lifetime's deal? A necromantic romance?" Sera yanked her sleeve free from Dahlia's flower-coated grip. "It is not a necromantic romance." Elias, entirely unhelpful. "It could be." Sera turned to strangle him. Before she could commit ghostly murder, a familiar voice, dry, slow, and laced with the kind of boredom that came from old immortality, cut in. Well. A ripple of sarcasm, a shadow stretching along the cobblestone path. Tobias Graves had arrived. Coffee-dark eyes peered at them over the rim of a fragile porcelain teacup, his elegant, perpetually unimpressed form draped in a perfectly tailored black coat. The very picture of effortless disdain. Sera's last chance at reason. "This is new." Tobias sipped his drink. Blood, definitely blood, and studied Elias with the detached air of someone witnessing a particularly ridiculous performance. He lifted a brow at Sera. "You've never been haunted by a suitor before." Sera's left eye twitched. "I am not being haunted by a suitor." Elias floated a little closer, entirely too at ease in her personal space. "She's in denial." Tobias gave an approving nod. "That tracks." Sera turned her glare on him. "You are supposed to be the reasonable one." Tobias arched a brow, purely indifferent. "I never agreed to that role." Before this disaster could escalate any further, a new, far more excitable voice entered the scene. "Holy shit, ghosts are real!" Sera barely had time to brace herself before Finley Redfern, the absolute worst morning person alive, came skidding to a stop directly in front of Elias, amber eyes as wide as a full moon. The werewolf buzzed with excitement, his entire body straining forward like a dog catching the scent of something interesting. "Oh my, wow, this is awesome!" Finn sniffed the air, his head tilting. "You don't smell like anything. Do all ghosts smell like nothing? Wait. He practically vibrated on the spot. "Can you walk through walls? Do you ever get stuck?" Sera pinched the bridge of her nose. "Finn. Can you feel things? Do you get cold? Wait, can ghosts taste food, or is it just for, nostalgic suffering?" Elias, instead of fleeing like a man with sense, actually considered the question. "You know," he mused, touching a ghostly hand to his chin, "I never thought about it that way." Finn beamed. "You want to test it out?" Sera yanked Finn back before he could start experimenting. "No, he does not," she deadpanned. Finn pouted. "But this is scientific discovery." She turned a murderous glare on him. "Finn." He wisely zipped his lips, but the damage was done. Dahlia was positively vibrating with excitement. Tobias was silently watching her unravel. Elias was thriving under the attention. And Finn, fucking fin was still staring at Elias with the expression of someone who was absolutely about to make it everyone's problem. Sera squeezed her eyes shut, inhaled, exhaled. Then, with the quiet, resigned grace of a witch who had completely lost control of her own life, she muttered, "Where is Granny Hazel?" Dahlia, still fluttering like a delighted sparrow, barely paused before answering. "Oh, she left yesterday on some secret old witch business. Won't be back for at least 2 weeks." Sera's stomach plummeted. 2 weeks. Elias pressed a ghostly hand to his heart, looking smug as sin. 2 whole weeks? My love, that's more than enough time for you to fall for me properly. Sera ground her teeth so hard she was fairly certain she was about to break one. Absolutely not. Elias only grinned wider. "Oh, darling, denial only makes it more romantic." "I need a drink." Elias, delighted, floated closer. "Well, finally, a suggestion I can wholeheartedly agree with." Sera stomped off toward the tavern. The haunt, the bane of her existence, trailed at her side, grinning like a man who had won. She shot him the deadliest glare she could manage. "You are the worst thing that has ever happened to me." Elias sighed, dreamy and tragic. "Oh, my love," he breathed, "you say the sweetest things." Sera needed whiskey, immediately.